I knew something was off the second Logan smiled at me like he'd already won. Not a regular smile, no, this was the smug, slow kind that oily men give you when they think they're the smartest one in the room. I was in the break room reheating my coffee for the third time when he leaned against the counter like he owned the place, all puffed up in his tailored blazer and Dad's last name stitched into his smug little resume. Big week, huh? He said. Audit season. Then he winked. Not in a flirty way, God no, but like we were sharing some unspoken joke. Only I hadn't heard the setup yet. That's the thing about gut feelings. They whisper before they scream. And my gut, after 15 years of untangling compliance nightmares and saving this company from fines that could bankrupt a small country, was already screaming in Morse code. Get ready. Logan had been shadowing me for 2 weeks now, fresh out of some overpriced MBA mill with a degree in leadership, and all the charisma of a wet sock. Supposedly he was here to learn operations from the ground up. What he actually did was hover, prod, and ask questions that no junior associate would ever think to ask. Questions about file retention policies, which audit trail software we used, and my personal favorite, how far back the security camera archives went. By the 5th day, I caught him standing just a little too long near the storage server rack. Badge logs said he was authorized by someone in IT, someone who hadn't spoken to me since 2019, and just so happened to play poker with Logan's dad every Thursday night. I didn't say anything. Just logged the access and kept moving. That's the secret they don't teach in business school. Real power is quiet. You don't need to bark if you know where the leash is. Oh, real quick, while I've got you, 97% of people listening never hit subscribe or like. If this kind of story grips you like a car crash in slow motion, go ahead and hit that button. Keeps this going. It really helps the team behind all this put out more of these stories. Anyway, the day Logan started showing up to meetings with a tablet full of my notes, my internal compliance checklists, color-coded exactly how I do it, I stopped pretending this was normal. I still didn't say anything. But I noticed. I noticed how his questions got sharper. I noticed how he always hovered just far enough behind me to read my screen. And I noticed when I came in early one Monday morning and saw the badge log system had been reset, wiped clean over the weekend. No email from IT. No maintenance notice. Just a bright, blank sheet where last week's entries should have been. I stood there a long time in front of the terminal, staring at that empty log like it was a crime scene. Because it was. Not loud, not messy, but surgical. That's what made it scarier. I'd seen this kind of thing before. Back when a junior staffer tried to hide a 6-month lapse in vendor verification. We caught it before it hit the regulators, but barely. That kid? Gone within the hour. Logan wasn't that kid. Logan had insulation. He was the VP's kid. His smirk didn't come from confidence. It came from consequence immunity. He could light the building on fire and someone would probably hand him a matchbook with a bonus. So I did what I've always done. I started documenting everything. Quietly. Carefully. Daily logs backed up to a personal drive I kept separate from the network. Email drafts timestamped and unsent. No accusations. No confrontations. Just breadcrumbs. Because Logan thought he was playing chess. What he didn't know was that I wrote the damn rulebook. And I was already 3 moves ahead. It started with snide little comments in the Monday huddles. Nothing overt, he wasn't that dumb, but just enough to shift eyes toward me. Well, some departments move faster than others, Logan said, smiling wide across the conference table, like we were in on some inside joke. I was running a compliance gap audit on vendor contracts from 2017, and anyone with a brain knew that kind of work takes time. But there he was, sliding his gaze toward me just long enough for the jab to land. The project manager chuckled nervously. My director didn't even look up from his iPad. And just like that, the kid scored his first point. The following Thursday, I found myself copied on an email chain I should have never seen. Because it was my own internal draft memo about a pending risk in our archival backups. I hadn't sent it. Hell, it wasn't even finished. But Logan had accidentally attached it to a completely unrelated report he was submitting to legal. Claimed he thought it was the updated document from last quarter. Classic mix-up, he said. Even apologized. My bad, guess I clicked the wrong file. You're the expert, right? He said that last part with his chin tilted just enough to make me want to rip it off his face. That draft memo had a red tag at the top. Preliminary. For internal use only. Do not circulate. Which means anyone in legal who read it now had eyes on an unresolved risk we hadn't reviewed yet. I spent the rest of the day in cleanup mode, calling in favors from my old buddy in records and explaining carefully and calmly that no, our servers weren't vulnerable. That was a modeling assumption, not a live scenario. They bought it. Barely. I didn't even confront Logan. I just watched. Because the more confident he got, the sloppier he became. Which is why I wasn't surprised when I walked into my office the next morning, dropped my bag and noticed, subtle as a shift in air, that the bottom right drawer of my desk was slightly ajar. I always lock it. Always. And the key never leaves my lanyard. I opened it slowly. Nestled between my audit checklists and a paperclip tin sat a manila folder I had never seen before. Heavy. Clean. Centered like someone had placed it there with intention. I pulled it out and flipped the tab open. It was a restricted compliance file. Real but wrong. It had the watermark from our third-party verification partner, the signature from a senior compliance officer, who, by the way, had retired in 2019, and a dated logo we stopped using 2 years ago. I checked the metadata. The last edit timestamp said 6:42 a.m. I got to the office at 7:10. He'd been in here. That file didn't just look out of place, it looked planted. Like a piece of bad meat tossed in your trunk to rot. Just enough to stink, not enough to notice until it's too late. But he'd made one mistake. He assumed I'd panic. I didn't. I closed the folder, put it back in the drawer, locked it, sat down, logged the time. Then I opened my incidents file. Entry number 17. Unauthorized document appears in desk drawer. Restricted classification. Metadata inconsistent. Log 7:16 a.m. No confrontation. Observing. Because I wasn't walking into his trap. I was going to bury him in it. I didn't sleep that night, not from panic but from strategy. I lay there in bed, coffee cold beside me, replaying every interaction with Logan like I was building a case file. The way he hovered behind me, the batch logs, the accidental email, and now a restricted compliance file sitting in my drawer like it had grown legs and walked there itself. He wanted me rattled. He wanted me scared enough to trip. But I've spent 15 years being the quiet firewall between this company and a $4 million fine. And I wasn't about to fumble because some daddy's boy in turn wanted to play cloak and dagger with fake paperwork. So the next morning I dressed sharp. Black slacks. Clean blazer. The same calm bun I wear on audit days when I need people to assume I'm harmless. I got to the office early. Earlier than Logan. The folder was still in the drawer. Untouched. I left it there. Poured myself a coffee. Smiled at Carol from payroll like I didn't have a loaded gun in my desk. At 9:30, the weekly staff sync started 2 floors up. Everyone from legal, risk, and operations was required, including Logan. I waited until 9:41, plenty of time for the stragglers to settle into their donuts and deck routine. Then I stood, walked down the hall, and turned into his office like I belonged there. His briefcase was exactly where I hoped it'd be. Propped open on the side chair, leather shiny and empty but for a monogram notepad and 2 pens that probably cost more than my car battery. I sat down slowly, slid the drawer open, pulled out the file. No gloves, no fanfare. I lifted the notepad, placed the file underneath, repositioned the pens. Shut the briefcase. No rush. No nerves. Just a quiet operation in surgical silence. As I left, I paused at the door, glanced down the hallway empty and pulled out my phone. Opened my private encrypted notes app. Typed one line, drawer anomaly. Logged at 10:13 a.m. Relocated source material. Ongoing observation. Saved. Synced. Timestamped. Then I walked back to my office, opened an Excel file, and started inputting last quarter's vendor renewals like nothing had happened. Because to Logan this was still a game. But to me it was already evidence. I wasn't just flipping the script. I was handing him the pen and letting him write the ending. And he had no clue he'd already signed it. The first sign something was off came with the footsteps. Fast, deliberate, the kind that slap against tile with purpose. Then the double ding of the elevator and the hush that followed. Like the building itself was holding its breath. I looked up from my screen just as the compliance team swept onto the floor. 4 of them. No smiles. No clipboard small talk. Just badges, black binders, and eyes scanning the room like searchlights. "Morning," said one, a tall woman I recognized from the internal audit unit. Her tone was professional but clipped. "We're conducting a Tier 2 protocol review. This floor is subject to spot inspection. Please remain at your workstations." Whispers bloomed instantly. "You'd think someone pulled the fire alarm." I caught Carol from payroll mouthing, "What the hell?" to herself as she clutched her coffee like a rosary. Nobody moved. Except Logan. "Oh," he said, rising from his seat like he'd been rehearsing. "I can help with that." He walked toward them with the same condescending gait he used when explaining how metadata isn't as reliable as people think. And there it was again, that same damn smirk. The one he wore the day he leaned against the break room counter and winked. The smirk of a man who thought he'd engineered the perfect downfall. "Is this about the vendor records?" he asked, gesturing vaguely toward my section of the floor. "I've been monitoring some inconsistencies. Happy to walk you through what I've seen." I didn't even blink. Just looked back at my monitor and pretended I was reformatting a quarterly summary. If anyone had asked, I'd have said I was just as blindsided as the rest. Just another cog in the machine trying to stay out of the storm. One of the compliance officers walked past me, paused and scanned my desk. No reaction. No questions. Nothing in the drawer because there was nothing left in the drawer. She moved on. Logan, meanwhile, was rambling to the lead auditor about data hygiene and unindexed file structures, tossing around just enough jargon to sound informed without saying a damn thing. Then one of the officers stepped into Logan's office. He wasn't expecting that. There was a beat, a quiet, tight second, where I swear you could feel the shift in the air. Logan's smile faltered, but only slightly. He turned toward his door, still trying to stay casual. "There's nothing sensitive in there. Just client notes and—" "Sir, is this your briefcase?" the officer interrupted. Yeah. Why?" She didn't answer. Just unlatched it. Time slowed. She reached in, pulled out that folder and flipped it open. The watermark. The mismatched metadata. The signature from a retired compliance officer. A restricted file in pristine condition inside Logan's personal case, under his own damn notepad. Everyone froze. "I've never—" he started too quickly. "I don't know how that got." "Sir," the lead auditor said, stepping closer, "we're going to need you to step aside." Logan went pale. His eyes flitted around the room like he was searching for a lifeboat. But no one moved. Not even me. Especially not me. I kept my expression neutral, my breath steady, my hands resting gently on the keyboard like I hadn't just fed a predator his own tail. He looked at me once, just once, as they led him into the conference room. Eyes wide. Smirk gone. He knew. But it was too late. They say nothing's ever really private in an office. But most people forget just how many eyes are watching, especially the ones bolted to the ceiling. Security footage had always been part of our protocol, but it was rarely used unless someone slipped in the kitchen or misplaced a company tablet. So when the compliance lead walked out of the conference room and said, "We're pulling camera 7, a chill swept across the floor like someone had opened a walk-in freezer. Logan had been inside for 20 minutes, trying to talk his way through whatever excuse he was cobbling together. But when I saw Meredith from legal step out, phone to her ear, and mutter the words, "He's on his way down," I knew the gravity had shifted. He was the CEO, Peter Lawton. The man who hadn't set foot on our floor in over a year. The man who didn't show up unless someone was being promoted or executed. By the time the email came, conference room A, mandatory attendance. The entire floor was already buzzing. People filed in with wide eyes and tight lips. Even Carol from payroll clutched her coffee like it was a lifeline and whispered, "Do you think someone's getting fired?" I didn't answer. Just slid into a seat near the back, arms folded, calm as glass. The screen was already lit when Lawton entered, flanked by the head of security and 2 board-level legal advisors. He didn't speak, just nodded once and the footage began. Camera 7. Hallway. Timestamp. Monday, 6:41 a.m. There he was, Logan, jogging lightly down the hallway, hoodie over his head like he didn't want to be noticed. He glanced over his shoulder, ducked into my office and disappeared from frame. 15 seconds passed. Then he reappeared, empty-handed, straightening his jacket like he was late for brunch. Murmurs started. A few people leaned forward. Lawton didn't move. New angle. Camera 12. My office. This one was worse. Clearer. Unflinching. Logan enters. Opens the drawer. Places the folder inside with surgical precision. Closes it. Glances around once, then pauses. Looks directly at the cabinet glass. Smiles. Someone gasped. Next segment. Tuesday. 9:41 a.m. Me entering his office. Calm. No hesitation. Opening the briefcase. Lifting the notepad. Placing the file inside. Closing it. Exiting. No drama. No speech. Just methodical movement. Then silence. Nobody said a word. Not compliance, not HR, not the legal team. Lawton stared at the frozen frame on screen. Me. Exiting Logan's office. Eyes forward like I was walking away from a burning building. He turned slowly. Looked directly at Logan, now slumped in the corner. Color drained from his face like someone had pulled the plug. Then Lawton spoke. For words. Jaw tight. Voice even. Play it again. Twice. The second playback ended. Peter Lawton turned his head, slow, deliberate, and locked eyes with the lead counsel from legal. Protocol, he said flatly. Now. She didn't ask which one. She knew. The kind of protocol that doesn't involve gentle warnings or write-ups. The kind that activates digital lockdowns, compliance reviews, and silent terminations. The kind you only invoke when a threat's already inside the building. HR, he snapped next, barely moving his eyes. Flag every credential he's used in the past 30 days. I want the badge logs, cloud access, device pairing history, and shared drive pulls. Full report. Across the room someone stood. Logan. Wait, hold on, I didn't mean, he stammered, voice cracking as he took a shaky step forward. There's an explanation. Lawton didn't look at him. Sit down. But Logan didn't get the chance. The door burst open. In stormed Wallace Merritt, Logan's father, executive vice president of operations, and the second most powerful man in the company. His tie was askew, cheeks flushed with fury, as if he'd sprinted from the 12th floor without waiting for the elevator. What the hell is going on? He barked, eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. Cold, quiet, arms still folded like I was watching a boardroom documentary unfold. Lawton turned his head only slightly. Wallace, your son just planted a forged compliance file to try and frame an officer of this company. It's all on camera. Wallace scoffed, then gave a short, forced laugh. Oh, for God's sake, Peter. It was a test. You really think Logan would actually sabotage a teammate? He's in training, for Christ's sake. This was an exercise. A simulation. No one moved. Even the air felt insulted. Peter raised a brow slowly. A test. Yes, Wallace insisted, straightening his cuffs like he was resetting the narrative. We've been trying out real-world exposure training. We wanted to see how she'd respond under pressure. That's what this was. I didn't say a word. Didn't have to. Lawton stepped forward just one step. But it dropped the temperature in the room another 10 degrees. Your son broke 3 federal compliance policies, 2 internal security protocols, and nearly triggered a legal review with our auditors. That's not a test. That's entrapment. Wallace opened his mouth, closed it. His son looked like he was about to faint. And I watched. Not triumphant. Not smug. Just still. I'd lived in the shadows of this place long enough to know that silence, wielded properly, was its own kind of blade. Peter turned to the room. Effective immediately. Logan Merritt is suspended from all duties pending formal investigation. IT is locking out all credentials. Security will escort him off-site. Logan's voice cracked into a whimper. Dad. Wallace didn't speak. He just stared forward, no longer at me, not at Peter, but at the screen now frozen with the image of his legacy undone. No one applauded. No one smiled. But they all knew. The smirk was dead. And the cleanup had begun. The building felt different the next morning. Not quieter, no, the phone still rang, the elevator still groaned. Carol still microwaved that awful tuna casserole at precisely 11:47, but different. Tense in a way that buzzed below the surface. Like everyone was waiting for another shoe to drop, except this time, they weren't sure how many feet were left. I walked into my office and found a sealed manila envelope waiting for me on the chair. No note. No instructions. Just my name, handwritten in careful blue ink. Inside was a summary report from Internal Audit, Logan Merritt Case Review. Turns out my little episode hadn't been a one-time stroke of genius on his part. It was a pattern. 3 months ago, a junior analyst in vendor management was let go for misconduct. The official story was that she tried to manipulate onboarding data to hide a late invoice. Only now, under a microscope, it looked like someone else had been logged into her terminal that morning. Someone using an admin credential borrowed from a shadow training profile. Guess who had access to that profile? Logan. 6 weeks before that, an entry-level auditor in the international division resigned after a sudden and unexplained citation for accessing restricted server folders. She tried to appeal it, said someone must have planted the access, but the logs were airtight. Or so they thought. Until yesterday. Now those logs look suspiciously similar to the ones I'd found scrubbed from our own badge system. In both cases, Logan had overseen the staffers. In both cases, he'd volunteered to help clean up the aftermath. The pattern wasn't loud, but it was there. Hidden like mold under new paint. By lunch, the whispers had evolved into full-blown theories. People remembered how Logan had wandered, how he asked too many questions about which cameras had blind spots, how he accidentally spilled coffee on a paralegal's laptop the same week a red flag document vanished. Suddenly, his incompetence didn't seem like entitlement. It seemed strategic. Peter Lawton called an emergency board session by 2 p.m. Legal was already neck-deep in damage control, reviewing every contract signed under Logan's observation, every personnel file he'd touched. HR was quietly reopening dismissed employee cases with unusually abrupt exits, 6 in all. And me? I went back to work. I reopened a 2020 gap audit that had been shelved during budget cuts and started rebuilding the integrity checks from scratch. No dramatics. No press release. Just lines of policy and revision marks. Someone asked me at the copier if I felt vindicated. I shrugged. It's not about feeling anything, I said. It's about making sure this never happens again. And I meant it. Logan wasn't the disease, he was a symptom of what happens when people mistake pedigree for proof. When power skips the vetting process. But now the scalpel was out. And the bleeding had just begun. It was the Friday after the board meeting when the company-wide email went out. No subject line tricks. No softened phrasing. Just pure legal steel. Effective immediately, Logan Merritt is no longer employed with Merritt Klein Industries. The company is cooperating fully with ongoing investigations. That last line said more than the rest combined. Everyone knew what it meant. Charges. Real ones. Attempted entrapment. Document forgery. Misuse of classified compliance systems. The kind of charges that don't just end careers, they stain family names. Especially when your last name is carved into the side of the building. But the bigger shock came an hour later, when another email followed, shorter, colder. Wallace Merritt, EVP of Operations, has been placed on administrative leave pending internal review. Interim leadership assignments will be announced Monday. That one sent a ripple through the company like a dropped stone in a still pond. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone was thinking the same thing. The old guard was falling. The dynasty had cracked. And no one knew how far the fractures ran. I didn't gloat. Didn't celebrate. I kept my head down, filed my weekly compliance updates, and answered questions as they came. Nothing more, nothing less. That was the deal I made with myself the second I moved that folder. No victory laps. No petty speeches. Just clean lines and corrected ledgers. But Peter Lawton called me in late that afternoon, just as the sun was hitting the glass in his office like an interrogation light. He didn't waste time. "You're the reason we still have a risk team," he said, pouring 2 cups of burnt black coffee and sliding one across the desk. "And probably the reason we avoided a federal audit." I didn't answer. Just waited. "We've decided to restructure," he said. "Starting Monday, we want you as Chief Risk Officer. Full authority. New staff, your own budget, dotted line to legal, not ops." I let the silence hang there for a few seconds, not because I was stunned, but because I wanted to feel it. The full weight of the moment. The irony. Appreciate the offer, I said finally, taking the coffee. But I'm not interested in a title. Peter tilted his head. Why not? Because titles change, I said. Power doesn't. Let me keep doing what I do best, quietly. Just give me the clearance, a raise, and 3 more staffers who can keep their mouths shut and their hands clean. He smiled. Nodded once. Done. And that was it. No photos. No speech. No plaque. I walked out of that office the same way I walked in, unnoticed. Except this time the entire building moved a little differently when I passed. Not afraid. Not in awe. Just aware. Because they'd all seen the footage. And they knew exactly who kept this place from burning down. It was nearly midnight when I finally shut down the company laptop. Not because there was anything urgent, just habit. After 15 years in compliance, your nervous system runs on low-level paranoia. You learn to live in the margins. To trust the timestamp more than someone's word. To believe in evidence like religion. The house was still. My cat snored on the radiator like a broken faucet. A half-empty mug of reheated coffee sat on a coaster that hadn't moved since 2009. I opened the private drive on my old personal machine, one I never let touch the company network, and pulled up the folder labeled Shadow Archive. Inside were years of logs, timestamp notes, and surveillance footage I'd bookmarked when something didn't sit right. Not because I expected anything to happen, but because I knew if something did, no one would believe it without proof. I found the file I was looking for. Camera 7. The hallway footage from that Monday morning. The moment Logan had slipped into my office at 6:41 a.m. I hit play. There he was, hoodie drawn. Phone tucked to his chest like a high schooler sneaking out after curfew. He paused at my door, glanced toward the camera. Not camera 7, the wide-angle one he thought he could outsmart, and stepped in. The feed jumped. 5 seconds later he re-emerged. And then it happened. He turned back to the drawer. Just for a second. His reflection caught in the glass. And he smirked. That same self-satisfied little curl of the lip. That I beat the system look. Like he thought the whole company was one big Rubik's Cube and he just peeled the stickers off to win. I watched that frame hold on screen for a moment longer. A silent monument to arrogance. To shortcuts. To the kind of inherited confidence that always forgets someone somewhere is watching. I took a sip of my coffee. Lukewarm now. Bitter. Moved the cursor. Clicked archive. The window closed. And that was that. He thought I was just the guy in the corner. Turns out I was the firewall.